You're watching BionicDance. Don't run on automatic, instead, please think.
I don't need God to be happy. And I often hear people say this to me with a sort of look on their faces, this means they can dismiss Christianity entirely. And rather than feel threatened by that, when someone says to me, I don't need God to be happy, I love to say to them, what do you mean by the word happiness?
And I would have to ask, do you really not know? This is just one of those little debate tricks theists love to use to deflect, to avoid being in the hot seat of any discussion. It's disingenuous and dishonest, and I'm having none of it. Let's do this.
BionicDance's YouTube channel.
Greetings, fellow space travelers, BionicDance here. We haven't seen our friend Andy in quite some time, mostly because his videos have been few and far between, and what he has made has been pretty crappish. Today, he's gonna break down for us why God is necessary for true happiness. Though what the distinction is between true happiness and the low-cal diet happiness I have as an atheist is kind of unclear.
You know, it's interesting that the ancient thinkers, especially the ancient Greeks like Aristotle and others, were fond of breaking the word happiness into 4 types of happiness, 4 levels of happiness.
What just happened here is that Andy has decided upon which scale of happiness, which method of measuring happiness he'd like to use, and he's expecting us to agree that it's the only one. I'm gonna play along because he's not here and I can't debate him on this point, but keep in mind that you and I can set our own scale of happiness if it suits us. You do you, friends.
The lower level of happiness is animal happiness, you know, food and sex, basically.
Stop drilling, you've hit oil. Food and sex? Sounds like a damn good weekend to me. So tell me, Andy, what's the catch?
But the problem with trying to fulfill our needs for happiness just at the level of food and sex is those things are transitory. You know, I eat the donut is gone, I have the relationship, one day the relationship will come to an end. And ultimately, if you try and make things like food and sex the only thing you're living for, you will actually end up ultimately disappointed. You'll end up unhappy at level 1, and you need to move up a level.
Sure, it's transitory. That's why you get more of it and ride that endorphin high as far as it'll take you. Not really seeing the problem, unless you run out of food and girlfriends. And now Andy says that there are higher levels of happiness. Even if food and sex aren't enough, that doesn't mean we have to replace them with level 2. It sounds as if we have a whole smorgasbord of delights from which to choose. So hey, keep 'em coming, if you know what I mean.
What's happiness level 2? Well, for the ancient thinkers, again, happiness level 2 was having more of something than somebody else. Perhaps being, if you're a university student, having your grades are the best in the class. Or if you play sport, having a reputation for being the fastest and the strongest and the best on the cricket team.
So level 2 is a kind of social greed, the neener of snarky delights. I admit there's a darker part of me that takes a spiteful pleasure at crushing my enemies, seeing them driven before me and hearing the lamentations of their women. But I try to reserve it for when someone has been a butt munch about my own previous failures. Show me sportsmanship and I'll return it.
But the problem with happiness level 2 is it's great while it lasts. There's nothing wrong with having a skill and excelling at it, but ultimately it too comes to an end. One day somebody joins your team who is a better sports person than you are. One day a new person joins your team at work and they're the boss's favourite and you're not.
So you go back to level 1 for a while. Go out, have a beer, get laid. Then find some new world to conquer. Just because one pleasure ends doesn't mean you can't replace it or do 2 at once.
You see, if you try and live your entire life at happiness level 2, you will again end up miserable and unhappy and anxious.
Andy's obviously trying to say that you need to go to level 3, but it seems to me that the real crux of the issue is trying to live your entire life at level 2. And as I say, most of us can multitask. I'll have an order of level 1 and a double helping of level 2, please. And heck, maybe I've got room for level 3. Oh, waiter, can I hear the specials, please?
What's happiness level 3, according to the ancient thinkers? Well, happiness level 3 is pouring your life into somebody else, living entirely to look after and care for somebody else. A very common example is parenthood, having children, for example. But if you haven't got kids, you can often achieve this through charity work.
That actually doesn't sound like the best time in the world. Oh, I'm not saying it's not worth doing, but if you demanded I rank what makes me happy, the top 5 will probably be occupied by things like movies, games, spending time with friends, and other such things. What Andy's describing sounds much more like work and responsibility. And taking care of my kitty is about as much responsibility as I'd like. Who's my little kitty face? Oh.
But the problem with trying to live your entire life at happiness level 3 is, again, it comes to an end. In parenting, we have a name for this. We call it the empty nest syndrome. Eventually your children will grow up and leave home.
And then you go buy some recreational weed, start an orgy, get a cat, and enter VR tournaments. That's levels 1, 2, and 3 all in one package. Guess we're having some fun now.
But the other problem with trying to find happiness just at this level was pointed out by the great atheist thinker Friedrich Nietzsche, who said the problem with so many Westerners in particular is they only help others because they want to feel good about themselves. And if you're doing that, you're not really serving other people, you're just serving yourself. It's basically selfish.
So? No, really. So? You're happy. They're happy. Everybody wins. Do you think the homeless, hungry fellow gives a rat's tiny hiney whether you fed him that sloppy joe selflessly if it makes you happy to do it? Good is good, no matter your motivation.
What is happiness level 4? Well, quite simply, happiness level 4 is discovering something bigger to live for that is genuinely bigger than you.
Is that really going to bring you happiness, though? Because it sounds like struggle. It sounds like strife. It sounds like anything but fun. Oh, sure, succeeding at a goal, like fighting for your rights against oppression or curing a disease, is going to be awesome. But that's the end game. During, it's probably going to be rather stressful. And then, once you've succeeded, it's just like every other level. It's over, and you have to find something new. So really, how is this any different?
And for Christians, that, of course, is ultimately a relationship with God. Christians believe that the whole purpose of life is to find that relationship with God from which we've been separated due to our rebellion and our self-centeredness and our tendency to pursue happiness and all these other things. And Christians believe that when you find that relationship with God through Jesus and the forgiveness and adoption into God's family that He welcomes, then you can truly find happiness at level 4, a happiness that doesn't run out, a happiness that can't be taken away from you, a happiness that isn't primarily selfish.
Well, now I have to ask Andy's question back at him. What do you mean by happiness? Because even leaving aside the part where I don't think for a moment that God exists, suppose I find that relationship. This makes me happy because I can explain why food, sex, victory, and making other people happy would give me pleasure. In fact, if you give me a few minutes to look it up, I can probably even explain to you why each of these things might boost my endorphin levels or something. But a relationship with God? Whoopee. Big, fat, hairy deal. How does that lead to happiness, Andy? What kind of happiness? I just don't see it.
And the great thing is, when you discover happiness at level 4, that relationship with God, it pours back into the other levels. Because now you can see parenthood and charitable work and succeeding at sport or work and food and sex. You can see those things not as ways that we desperately try to find our identity.
Identity? When did this become about identity? I thought we were talking about happiness. Is that where the difference truly lies between atheists and theists? Do you feel that you are nobody without your religion, Andy? Do you need to be part of it to have an identity? Are you unable to comprehend a person who doesn't need such things? Maybe this is how people end up in religions, in cults, in extremist groups. Heck, maybe it's why there is often a war between, say, Trekkies and Warsies. I remember when I was in middle school and we actually sat on different sides of the bus based on whether we preferred Debbie Gibson or Tiffany. Man, I wish I was joking. I don't need identity, or more specifically, allegiance, to be happy. Not saying it doesn't help, but it certainly isn't necessary. It sounds as if Andy does need this, and his allegiance is to his God. I find that bizarre, but if it makes him happy, who am I to argue? My issue with religion is how theists treat other people, and if they share and play nicely with the other kids, it's none of my business, really. But this is still kinda weird. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please, think. I admit, there's a darker part of me that takes a spiteful pleasure at crushing my enemies, seeing them driven before... Damn it. So you go back to level 1... Damn it, what's up with my throat? Captain's log. We are investigating an asteroid field where we've had reports of strange signals. So far we've found nothing, but our reconnaissance continues.
Captain, unidentified object approaching.
Scan object.
Aye, scanning object.
Captain, the object appears to be bombarding us with Patreon particles.
Is there any damage?
None. In fact, it seems to be giving us even more strength.
Fascinating. It seems that Patreon beams are a benefit to our mission. We must seek out more Patreonic life forms. Plot course and prepare to engage Bionic Drive. You're still here? It's over. Rate the video, subscribe, and close the window. Go.